Alafia, and greetings to all. I'm Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies here at Kane University, and I'd like to welcome, it's not loud enough? Can we turn this up? Possible? Is this better? Yes. Once again, Alafia, and greetings to all. I'm Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies here at Kane University, and it's always my pleasure to welcome you to the 2017 Office of Africana Studies African History Month lecture series and concert series. We do this every year. We've been doing it even longer than when I've been here. I've been here 25 years, and we've been doing it even longer than that. So welcome once again. Before we begin with our guest speaker, I'd like to give you a little bit of information. All of you have a little program, a little brochure of our program, but I'd like to emphasize certain things before we finish. Today we have our very special guest speaker who I'll introduce in a moment. Tomorrow we're going to have another very special guest speaker, Marsha Lee Watson, who's going to be talking about women and incarceration. She was the former head of the New York State Black Correction Officers Union, and she'll be here tomorrow to talk about that. And then immediately right after, we're going to have the Jackie McLean African Heritage Jazz Concert with a good friend of mine who I used to play with when I was playing some jazz back in the day, trying to blow trumpet, trying to be a little bit like Miles and a little bit like Freddie Hubbard and a little bit like Lee Morgan, a little bit like everybody who played trumpet. Renee McLean, he's going to bring his group tomorrow, and as an additional, I guess you might say, function of the band playing tomorrow, we're going to have an open mic session where people who have some positive poetry, some rap, and if you do those things, we're going to have the band improvise behind you, and you get have a chance to show what you can do. It'll be recorded live, and we'll make sure that you get a CD, a DVD, or CD, or whatever we have available of that. We're going to get right into the program, so I'm not going to read any of the bios. You can read that yourself, because in the interest of time, we need to get started, because I know people are going to be moving in and out, so we want to get into it. And I can't wait to sit down to hear our guest speaker. I couldn't wait to hear our guest speaker yesterday. How many people were here yesterday? And so did you enjoy what you heard yesterday? Did you learn something? So I know this is going to be a learning experience today. So without further ado, let me introduce our speaker, Dr. Tyrone Powers. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. Yeah, let's hear it for him. And this should be an informative session. And hopefully, at the end of the session, you guys will have a whole lot of questions for him. I heard there's an evidence course out here, and there may be some other course out here. There may be a few of my students here from cultural anthropology. So without further ado, Dr. Tyrone Powers.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. You all look so excited to be here, see your faces. So in the course of this kind of lecture, informal lecture, if you have any questions, just ask them at that time. We don't necessarily have to wait to the end, because it might be on your mind at that particular time, and I don't want you to forget it. So don't have to worry about that. It's kind of an informal session, so kind of relax. It's not like being in your classroom, some cases. All right, so you hope to learn something. I hope to learn something from you. I want to start, though, by introducing two of my colleagues. I actually had them introduce themselves, then I'll just give you a little bit on me, and that's DeLacy and Carol. DeLacy, you want to start with you, my friend and partner?
Good afternoon, DeLacy Davis, founder of Black Ops, eventually retired sergeant, 20 years. School principal, 5 years, and training around the country, around leadership, law enforcement, community relations. Good afternoon, thank you for the opportunity.
Carol?
Good afternoon, Carol Russell, retired sergeant from the Trenton Police Department in Mercer County, and I now do community outreach with retired sergeant DeLacy Davis with the Family Support Organization.
So we are, besides colleagues, we are really, really good friends, and we have worked together tremendous long time, and we had breakfast this morning. DeLacy actually paid for breakfast, which is a rare thing. Speaking of an evidence class, I think I made a hold on to the receipt that had proof of that, because nobody's going to believe he paid for it. But having said that, we've worked together for a great deal. Now, this is Black History Month, so I want this lecture to kind of deal with a couple of issues, concentrating on the the African American studies and the black issues concerning criminal justice in the field of criminal justice. But beyond that, how we got to where we are today. All over this nation, we are experiencing some crime issues and problems. Everyone's familiar with that, right? And a lot of the times we've looked at the issues over the last year. We've dealt with police brutality and excessive force issues. We've dealt with the different organizations, Black Lives Matter and other organizations been dealing with this particular issue. When I was in the, my history, let me give you that, then I'll come right back to it. I was a former Maryland State Trooper and then a special agent with the FBI for a number of years, working everything from counterintelligence, counterterrorism, the violent crime task force, a little bit undercover and drug cartel that went from Colombia, South America, and some other places. So I've done a lot of work in this particular field. When I was working undercover and working gangs and working the violent crime task force in Detroit area, what I began to clearly understand is that none of the people, especially the young people who are involved in these crime endeavors, wanted to be involved. I mean, they don't come out of the womb wanting to be involved in crime. There's an evolutionary process. And if we can intercept and intervene in a very serious way, then we can reduce a lot of this crime, dramatically reduce crime, increase life opportunities, because it's not just about reducing crime, it's about increasing life opportunities. We talk about reducing crime a lot, but if we don't make people's lives better, they're going to resort to whatever they need to resort to have food, clothing, and shelter. So it's beyond just reducing crime, it is increasing life chances. Having worked in this particular field, I am so certainly clear on that. So when I came out of the field, I'm now the director of the Homeland Security and Criminal Justice Institute at a college in Maryland. Also created an organization called the Children's First Movement and the People's Plan to Dramatically Reduce Crime in Baltimore City, which has a very high crime rate. So I took all of my experience from being in the FBI, all of my investigative experience, my sociological understanding of why people commit crimes, all my academic training, and then, as my grandmother said, a little bit of common sense to try to deal with this problem forthrightly in the history of this problem. You know, in the FBI, they used to say you will never effectively counter that which you do not fully understand. Superficial understanding can only lead to superficial solutions. So it doesn't really surprise me that we have the crime problem that we have in our cities across this nation today, because we address it in a very academic, sterile sense. We address it either by having just look at it from a policing lens, or we address it from a social science lens without pulling it all together. And by this point in our history, we should be better at this. You know what I mean? I always say that life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. And apparently, what we've done with all of our education, our advanced education, and our brilliance, with all our ability to create new weapons of mass destruction, to help cure diseases, we have not been able to reduce this crime problem and help people's life chances in any meaningful way. And that says that's an indictment on us, not necessarily the children who get involved in this, but an indictment on us. So I want to kind of cover that from an African American studies concept. And again, if you have any questions at any time, please raise your hand and we'll get to your question right away instead of waiting to the end. And then my partners are actually going to help me in the presentation. So they may jump in at any particular time. They may have a comment to make, or they may emphasize a point that I make, because I don't know everything. Even though I have to admit I'm one of the most brilliant people in the world, I don't know everything. I have to say that. If you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to believe in you, right? If you go into class and saying I'm the dumbest one in the class, you probably are, all right? So I'm never going to say that, whether it's true or not. All right. One of the things I've known about young people, and most of you in here are young, sorry, Lacey, some of you are young, but most of you in here are young, is that over time when I've engaged young people, that the hardest thing, people are not afraid of success. They're not afraid of failure, they're afraid of success. In other words, failure doesn't carry a lot of burdens with it. I mean, if you're a D student, it really ain't that heavy, because all you got to work for is to get a C. You understand what I'm saying? People are afraid of success because once you become successful academically or take a certain position, then there's a burden upon you to do something with it. You understand what I'm saying? If you know better and don't do better, that's a worse position to be in than if you don't know any better. So a lot of people avoid success. They'll tell you they're avoiding failure, but they avoid success because success is the heavier burden. I've talked to professors across this country. I used to teach at American University for a little while in Washington, D.C., and I've talked to professors across this country. We have the most brilliant academicians. I mean, I walk into their offices, and they have all kind of books lined, and I'm impressed. They have all kind of books around their wall, and the first question they ask is, how do we deal with this issue of poverty and crime and racism and all these other issues? And they say, we got to come up with a new plan. I'm saying, no, you really don't. You just got to read some of them them books you got on your wall. So the books are there to impress other people, but the burden of knowledge, taking something out of that book and doing something with it, have never got to them. So they're looking for new solutions. What about all those authors of all those books you read? Shouldn't you have a solution? If you haven't, then you probably are saying that all those historical figures that we talk about, whether it's Marcus Garvey or W.E.B. Du Bois or Dr. Carter G. Woodson, have nothing for us. I've got to come up with something new, and this day is time. It's an insult to all of those people whose books you are supposed to have read if you still looking for new solutions when people have been writing about solutions. But the problem is that even the best of us, once we become educated, we don't read as much. You understand? We are uneducated, we become educated, then we become arrogant, then we become useless. We were more useful when we were a little less educated because we had to work harder. But now we are Professor so-and-so, we wear plaid jackets and put a pipe in our mouth, talk down to students, right? So on and so forth. So we are of less use. So that's why we continue to have this problem. So people, to me, are more afraid of success and the burden that it carries. Now people have expectations of you. If you get a degree from this university in higher education, people are going to expect more from you than they would the person that don't have a degree. That's a little bit of a burden, right? If you're giving the same answers, hypothetically speaking, you're a criminal justice student, and someone say to you, what do you think about the death penalty? And you say, I don't know. Then they're going to say, what the hell you go to school for? I expect that from him. He didn't go to school. You went to school 4 years, majored in criminal justice, took political science and sociology, and upon graduation, that's your best answer? You just wasted somebody's money. So when you become educated, people expect better answers of you. Somehow, for some reason, we expect you to watch the news at night. We expect you to know, because you're in higher education, right? You're supposed to know a little bit more. But the mere fact that we have people in higher education who don't have answers to these questions or not even willing to try, you're in a classroom full of seniors and you ask them to answer a question and nobody raised their hand after 3 years of college, something's gone wrong. Life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid, right? Something's going wrong. And maybe it's the professors that have failed in those areas. Now, I'm not a Muslim. This comes from the Quran. It makes me think of my brother, DeLacy Davis. And I always use this because I've been doing this for a very long time, working with youth groups, creating youth groups, and so on and so forth. And a lot of people who I started to work with don't work with me anymore. I mean, they just got tired. And the world is full of tired people, and nobody gives a damn about any of them. You feel me? So they've got tired. And then they always tell me this, and then I found this in the Quran. You know, had it been a near gain and a short journey, they tell me this. They would have surely followed thee, but the hard journey was too long for them, and they will swear, had they been able, they would have gone forth with you. The truth is they would not have gone forth with you. They were doing it for their own personal aggrandizement. They wanted to be the star. And when the work became too hard and children began to die in the streets and the homelessness problem and the human trafficking problem, people back away and disappear. They just get tired. And if you get tired trying to save the lives of others, the good thing about the field that we're in, education, is that you can do two things at one time. You can make a living and make a life. And they're not mutually exclusive. You can at some point in your life sit on your front porch in your rocking chair, right, and say, you know what, no matter what happens to me now, I did some good. I still paid my bills, I got shelter, food, and clothing, so it allows you to make a living and a life. But so many people, since it's only about them, they're not going to stay with you when this thing gets difficult and tough. And that's why we are failing. There's no way with the brilliance in this nation we should be having the crime rates that we're having. That's an insult not on the children, but on the adults, because this is what the adults have the tendency to do. They blame the children all the time. You know what I mean? But the actions of the children is a reflection of the adults. If you have a hereditary eye problem and you go to the eye doctor, he doesn't tell the child, he doesn't tell the adult, look, your eyes are bad because your child's eyes are bad. He go the other way around. It's hereditary. It went this way. It didn't go that way. So whatever we're looking at, we have passed down to them. Whether we want to admit it or deny it or not, they are what we created in some form or fashion, right? We talk about it. We'll talk about it a little later. I'm going to move through this a little quicker in case you have questions. We talk about the Frankenstein theory. Whatever you create, you'll eventually confront. There's no way around that. All right, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Everybody familiar with that, the criminal justice students? But first of all, let me ask this question. Everybody familiar with the Constitution? You do know we have one. And you do know we're in the United States. I don't want to make any assumptions here, right? Right? Because we just said when we started, life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. All right? So I don't want to assume anything. You know about the 13th Amendment. Come after the 12th, if that helps any. All right? At least know that. All right, so it says that neither slavery nor voluntary servitude except as a punishment for a crime where of the party should have been duly convicted. What does that mean? Does that mean slavery is over? What does it mean then, since you're saying no?
I think it means that it's redesigned.
It's what?
It's redesigned. It's put into the jail.
Right, so if you were convicted of a crime, we never ended slavery. Right? So if you want free labor, you got to have convicts because the 13th Amendment to the United States, and I didn't write this, by the way. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution says slavery is over, but not really, right? There's an exception in that clause. Everybody familiar with that? But fully duly convicted. So if you're convicted of a crime and you're in prison, I can essentially enslave you. That's why we can have people in prisons who can work for $25 a day because technically they can't do that. It breaks the labor laws. But if you're in prison, I can enslave you. I can work you for that particular price. So I get free labor, right? So they wrote this into that document, right? Everybody was familiar with this? If not, you should be. Don't worry about not knowing. Hopefully you'll leave here knowing something that you didn't know. That's what all of us should do. Everywhere we go, we should be able to walk out and say, I learned something. You may not learn everything. Some of you may be falling asleep or thinking about, I don't know, dinner, lunch, McDonald's, whatever the hell. I mean, something else. But hopefully you get something out of it if you don't get everything, all right? 152 years under the 13th Amendment, U.S. Constitutional Amendment, persons incarcerated for any crime can be forced into slavery. We keep talking about 1863 and the Emancipation Proclamation, but we seldom, even as students of criminal justice, go into the 13th Amendment. We seldom do that to examine the problems that we're seeing today. While the fathers of our nation were fighting for their freedom from British rule and writing our U.S. Constitution, they did, in fact, have over 500 human beings that were listed in their account books as personal property that worked for them as slaves. These are the people who said all men are created equal, endowed with certain inalienable rights. We got to examine that. I mean, we don't examine it just to criticize and condemn people, but as the FBI say, you will never effectively counter that which you do not fully understand. You got to understand the origin of it in order to come up with some solutions for it. So our system, as much as we love this system, started with the idea that certain people were not equal. Right? And they haven't really got away from that. The 3/5 compromise, slaves would be counted as 3/5 in total when determining a state's correct congressional representation. See, you got to understand, this is in the U.S. Constitution. This is not a conspiracy theory or something that I make up. If you were African, you were 3/5 human. That's all you counted for. How do I get people out of that philosophy even today? We say we moved away from that. That's the old days. How do we know that? What has done that? Slave trade will continue for 20 more years after the ratification of the U.S. Constitution. Now, everybody know who this is? One person. Not everybody at once. We can sing together. We can't talk together. I know all of you are yelling their answer at me right now. I can't hear any of you. Can you quiet down and give me one person to give me the answer? Just everybody be quiet so I can get an answer from her. You know who that is? The picture on the thing. All right. It's not DeLacy Davis. I can tell you that for sure. Anyone. I mean, one of you geniuses, just anybody. I just need some help. Yes, ma'am. Rogers, no, ma'am. That's close, though. He got a last name. That's how close you are. Yes, ma'am. Who? No, ma'am.
Oh, it is Carter. Miss says it's
Dr. Carter G. Woodson, you know what's significant about that? What month is it?
February.
What month? What's this month called? Black History Month. But let me just say this, two things. This is the man who invented it. So we're celebrating Black History Month. We don't even know who the hell invented it. That's how much history we know.
Hello, somebody.
That's Dr. Carter G. Woodson. He created Negro History Week that became Black History Month. Now, think about this. We talk about it being the shortest month of the year. Why did he choose February? Yeah, why did he choose February? Because Abraham Lincoln's birthday, and he didn't give a damn about how many days was in the month. It was Frederick Douglass' birthday, and Abraham Lincoln's birthday was in February, so he chose this month for those particular reasons. That's why he chose February. Now, I hear people say, well, it's not fair, it's the shortest month of the year. Hell, you don't even know what he looked like. What do you care how many days? I can give you 40 days, and you still wouldn't know that was Carter G. Woodson. So what are you arguing about? You're arguing about the wrong thing. You understand what I'm saying? Secondly, when he created Negro History Week, this is what he said. He said, at some point, we will know history so well that we won't even need a week. Now we got a month and say that's too short. He thought this will be the start of people knowing and reading the history, so we won't need a week. Now we need a month, and we don't even know what he looked like for Black History Month. You understand what I'm saying? Now, whose fault is that? That's the educators who can celebrate Black History Month every year and never put up a picture of the guy who started it. That's not the children's fault. That's the educators. You understand what I'm saying? Somebody got to tell you that. That's grown folks' fault. That young folks don't know it. And where are we? In an institute of higher education, celebrating Black History Month, and we don't even know who the hell the creator looked like. Now, let me just say this to you. In his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, he kind of explained the crime problem that we had today. That's related back to crime. He said that it doesn't matter that you have the Emancipation Proclamation. He said because the battle is always for the mind of the individuals. When you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. If you train him up, miseducate him, undereducate him, underdevelopment, he is going to jail. Don't worry about putting him on the back of the bus. Don't worry about putting him on a plantation. He will go to the plantations you build called prisons because you control his mind, right? You do not have to tell him not to stand here or go yonder. He will find his proper place and he will stay in it. I don't have to tell black students to go to the back of the bus or the back of the class. That's where they congregate because I control their mind. I don't have to tell them to go to the back of the bus anymore. Go to the back of the class. We fought to sit up front. Now we go to the back automatically and don't even know why we're doing it. In 1930, he said, this is what it is. The battle is for the mind. The first revolution is a revolution of the mind. Change a person's thinking and you will change their actions. Just control their body and they will go back and do the same thing over and over again. I guarantee you this. Some of you individuals you're in classes here at the college, you don't have assigned seats, but you go to the same seat every time you go into class and get mad if somebody else sitting there like that's supposed to be your seat. He know I sit there. What the hell? You don't have a assigned seat. It's a college class. You gonna learn better in that chair? No, but he just know. You all swole up about the seat and not about the lesson plan.
Hello.
Right? Was Carter G. Woodson right? And we don't necessarily like what he said, but since he invented Black History Month and it is Black History Month, let's just go with him for now. All right? Let's just go with him. You do not have to send him to the back door. He will go without being told. In fact, if there's no back door, he will cut one for his special benefit. Control a person's thinking. You do not have to worry about their actions. You already know where the system is going to drive them. You know you need more prisons than schools because you control their thinking. What gets me is, and this is brilliant criminal justice professors, right? This is what they say. I can't understand why people keep going into prison and come out and committing the same crime. Now, one time when I was talking to my grandmother, she thinks, you know, you got all your education, got your Ph.D., you're brilliant and all. And we were having a conversation. She said, son, you're a brilliant young man. I'm so proud of you, but pick that up right there. I said, what are you talking about, Grandma? She said, pick that up. What's that? She said, you don't drop your damn common sense. You got so much education that you don't drop your common sense. So what she was saying is logically, even without higher education, if I put individuals in prison, don't do anything to change their thinking, as Carter G. Woodson said, what are they going to do? They're gonna come out and do the same thing. Let me give you a very elementary experiment. Take some dirty clothes and throw them in the washing machine. Don't turn the washing machine on, just leave them there for 10 years. And then expect them to come out clean. Not only are they not gonna come out clean, but because they're in there with other dirty clothes, they're gonna smell worse. But somehow, logical, intelligent people believe just putting people in prison gonna make them better when they come out, even though we don't have anything in there to clean them up. Does that make any, does that defy common sense? I don't know why we have a high recidivism rate. That's one of those big words professors use. But you didn't do anything to fix them when they went in there. If I go into prison, right, and I'm dealing with violence, and I get gang raped, how in 5 years am I going to come back as a better citizen? Well, I'm glad I had that experience. Now I'm ready to be a good citizen. I got beat up every day, shanked 3 times, and raped 6 times. Now I'm ready to change my life and be a better American. Really? That defies common sense and logic. But we say it, don't we? He been in prison. You got to change the thinking. That's what Carter G. Woodson says. The first revolution is a revolution of the mind. Change the thinking, you change the actions. You want to reduce crime, you got to change the ideas and thought process of the young people. In states, I went to Colorado recently because they're talking about, they legalized marijuana and all. And I said to the people, I said, listen, I understand, I'm not even putting a judgment on this. I said, but my problem is you're not telling the young people that if they even use marijuana legally, they are disenfranchising themselves from 700,000 federal jobs because the FBI is still not going to hire you. You can say, well, I didn't commit a crime. I know, but we don't hire people to use marijuana. So why they think they're doing something legal? Because they haven't thought about that. Now, they may still do it, but at least give them the information that you can go ahead and do this, but there's no need of getting a degree because you're not going to get the job you want because you made a choice. Now, they may still do it, but at least give them the information to make a good decision. You understand what I'm saying? So even if you do something legal, it could keep you from getting a top secret clearance. You got to know that. Then if you decide to do it, that's your choice. I'm not judging you. I don't really care. But there's no need of having a student major in criminal justice get a 4.0, and then I already know as a professor he ain't never going to work in this field because every day he come in here, he looking like the dude on Charlie Brown's smoke all over around his body from marijuana. But he got good grades. But he ain't never going to work in this field. I got to tell him that. Then, if he still decides to do it, then it's not on me anymore. But how many of us tell him that when we talk about legalizing drugs? That the federal government still won't accept you. That the FBI still won't accept you. That the CIA still won't accept you. The DHS still won't accept you. Even though you did something legal. Who's telling the young people? Is that their fault? No. It's the grown folks' fault. Okay. Carter G. Woodson wrote these two. I'm not going to go into all of them for the sake of time. The thought of inferiority of the Negro is drilled into him in almost every class he enters and almost in every book he studies. We're quoting him because he created Black History Month. He wrote a book called The Miseducation of the Negro to explain where we will be in 2017 if we did not change the thinking of young people. At that time, he was talking about Africans. The mere imparting of information is not education. I can give you a test. You can regurgitate it over and over again. I need to know your critical thinking skills. I tell students all the time when I teach them, I need you to talk to me. I know you can regurgitate this on a piece of paper, but that ain't going to help me. Because even if you become a police officer, you're not going to walk out the car with a constitutional book. You got to know this. You got to engage your critical thinking skills. I'd rather a C student that could think critically than an A student that's good at regurgitating information. That's why as professors, we got to give a variety of testing instruments. Not just a written test, but an essay, a conversation, participation. Because let me tell you something about young people. Some of you are young, some of you pretending to be young, and some of you act young. But either way, young people learn from observation, participation, and demonstration. The last way they learn is a whole lot of conversation. And that's just the nature of the physiological makeup of the brain of young people. Old people like to talk a lot, right? Young people have to see observation, demonstration, and participation. Then they change their behavior. You can't tell your child not to smoke marijuana if you're smoking it every night. It ain't gonna work. It just ain't gonna work. Don't do what I do what I say. That's stupid. They're visual learners. They're going to do what you say. You want to know why we have a crime problem? They're watching. They may not be listening, but they're damn sure watching. Right? Observation, participation, demonstration. The large majority of Negroes who have been put on the finishing touches of the best colleges are all but worthless in the development of their people. We are so educated that we're useless. Because now we just want to teach, use big words, wear nice clothes, have a pipe, get a nice check. Right? But we are not moving the needle. If I'm so brilliant and I've got a class of students, like my brilliant professor over here who teach evidence, then they should be able to do something with that. If at the end of the semester they can quote out of the book, but they can't critically think, I failed. I actually have failed, right? And that's how I should be graded, whether my students are getting better, not whether they're graduating. Because in cities like Baltimore, we have graduation rates that are different from education rates. To be quite frank with you, if I socially promote you and graduate you from high school, and then you go out and you realize that you're not educated enough to fill out an application, then you become a mental health issue. Because now everything that you've been taught about education is a lie. Because you've got the degree, they gave you that. I've been better off had you helped me and educated me right, and me not have expectations until I'm fully educated, rather than you telling me, here's a degree, now you're educated, or here's your high school diploma. Now you realize that even with all that education, you're not capable. Then it becomes a mental health issue. Then you're ready to kill something. Now it becomes self-destruction, right? So you're doing them a disfavor by lying to them. You're causing mental health issues. We've got to know that. Now, everybody know who this is? I think his name up there, but some people still going to get it wrong, so let me go over this. Everybody know who this is? Now, Thomas, how many books did Thomas Jefferson write? Yes, sir. How many write? Okay, all right. And my son had a homework assignment. He was supposed to look up the great Thomas Jefferson. Now, whether you know it or not, hypothetically speaking, I don't know how your vision is, but I'm an African American. All right. So he had a homework assignment to look up the great Thomas Jefferson. So he did. He wrote one book. He wrote one complete book in his entire life. Notes on the state of Virginia. In that book, the great Thomas Jefferson, who have a monument, right, Washington, D.C., who we love, wrote this about black people. The great, we talking about what Donald Trump say? He got nothing on Jefferson. Jefferson wrote, people ask why not retain and incorporate blacks into the state that saved the expense of supplying by importation white settlers for their vacancy. Deep-rooted prejudice entertained by the whites. He said, I know we're prejudiced against blacks. That's why we can't keep them in America. 10,000 recollections by the blacks of the injuries that they have sustained. He's admitting that we've delivered 10,000. This is the only book he ever wrote, by the way. This is not someone else quoting Jefferson. This is what he wrote, right? New provocations, the real distinctions which nature has made in many other circumstances will divide us into parties and produce convulsions which will probably never end, but in the extermination or one or the other race. Jefferson wrote that, not Donald Trump, all right? The Jefferson you love. This is what he wrote. The difference which strikes us in the color, whether the black Negro resides, and then go on and go on. Whether it proceeds from color, the difference is fixed in nature and is real, better known to us, and the difference of no importance, then he goes on to say it is. Are they not fine mixtures of red and white, the expressions of every passion? He said, it's just white people just look better. This is what Jefferson, this ain't Donald Trump. This is what Jefferson wrote. He said, preferable to that end, is not white preferable to even blacks than black people? Thomas Jefferson wrote this. He got a monument. We worship him. God bless America. He was president of the United States. Now, how come we don't know this if we're educated? About Thomas Jefferson, who only wrote one book completely. All right? Add to their flowing hair a more elegant symmetry of form, right? Their own judgment in favor of whites. In the 70s, this is what he wrote. He said, even blacks like us better. They don't even like them. Thomas Jefferson wrote this. All right? This ain't a radical. This is Thomas Jefferson. Everybody read this when you were coming up in elementary or middle or high school? About the great Thomas Jefferson with the monument? Why didn't you get this? Why didn't you get this if you have great teachers and educators? How do you skip over this, the only book he ever wrote, right? Besides color and figure of hair, there are other physical distinctions. They have less hair on their face than on body. He really studied us, didn't he? Jefferson had some extra time. I thought he was writing amendments and all, but I guess he has some extra time on his hand, which give them a very strong and disagreeable odor. They are at least as brave and more adventuresome, but this may be perhaps from want of forethought, which prevent their seeing danger until it be present. Get the book. I'm pretty sure they got it in the library here. One book, Notes on the State of Virginia. Get it online on your little bootleg phones, right? Go into your phones and pull up Notes on the State of Virginia. You will read these exact words because I don't want you to think I exaggerated, all right? They are more ardent after they're female, but love seems to be them more of an eager desire. We just lust than a tender, delicate mixture of sentiment and sensation. We don't really love, we lust. Right? Comparing them by faculties of memory, reason, and imagination, it appears to me that in memory they are equal to whites, in reason, much inferior. The improvement of blacks in body and mind in the first instance of mixture, so on and so forth, proves that their inferiority is not just the effect merely of their condition of life. It's not the environment. It's not how they live. God just created them inferior. Thomas Jefferson. And he got a monument. We sit at the foot of his monument and eat tuna fish sandwiches when we go to Washington. God bless America. I advance it, therefore, as a suspicion only that the blacks, whether originally a distinct race or made distinct by time and circumstances, are inferior to whites in the endowments of both my body and mind. The only book he ever wrote, the great patriot of this country, Thomas Jefferson, wrote that. We all should know it, whether we like it, disagree for the so on and so forth. You can't keep. So I had my son do that in his book report when he sent it back to the teacher. The teacher got the report and said, damn. Now, I didn't criticize and condemn his teacher, but how the children got to know this. You understand? So we got to have something to compare it to. COINTELPRO, everybody familiar with that? What was COINTELPRO? Give me one of the criminal justice geniuses. Yes, ma'am. Man, you answering all the questions, though. And you hide behind the professor. No, I'm just kidding. What was COINTELPRO? Now, let me just say this to you. How can we not teach this in criminal justice classes or in black history classes or in history classes in general? It's such a significant program. Anybody know who that is? Fred Hampton, right? Shot to death by the FBI in Chicago, Illinois. Secret program to undermine the popular upsurge in the community. Blacks have started to upsurge in the community, start to unify, start to create different programs and so on and so forth. He said we got to cut that out. Secretly instructed his field office to propose schemes to misdirect, discredit, disrupt, and otherwise neutralize specific individuals and groups, including Martin Luther King, Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, so on and so forth. Who did they use as an informant? Now, some famous people worked for the FBI against other blacks. Who became an informant for the FBI against Martin Luther King? Thurgood Marshall. I know. Kind of hurts, don't it? But it's Black History Month, so we might as well be honest, at least for these 28 days. All right. Final authority rested with top FBI officials in Washington who demanded assurance that no possibility of embarrassment to the Bureau. We had to be able to deny it. How would you do it? Infiltrate all their organizations, NAACP, SCLC. Malcolm X had half the people around him were FBI agents. He thought they were friends, they were actually agents, put in there by the FBI. Infiltration, informants that not merely spy on political activists, the main function was to discredit and disrupt. Now, let me just say this to you. The government have released this information, so we all should be teaching it and know it because it's such an important part of history and it explains why the communities are so divided today. In fact, the FBI actually gave out awards if FBI agents could cause fights between black groups in the community. In fact, they promoted the SAC special agent in charge in San Diego because he wrote a note and said, blacks fought last night, half of them killed the other one, we would like to take credit for that. And listen, the information is released under the Freedom of Information Act. You can go to government documents and get it right now. You don't have to say it's a conspiracy theory because they released it to you, but they know that hypothetically speaking, even in higher education, we're not going to read it. so they can tell you the truth, right? Other forms of deception, the FBI waged psychological warfare from the outside, bogus publications, forged correspondence, anonymous letters, telephone calls, and similar forms of deceit. When I was in the FBI, we had what we call FOBs, Friends of the Bureau. If I needed you as a member of the media to write a bad article about him, I just hired you to do it. And then I gave you inside information that promoted your career at the newspaper, came from the newspaper, didn't come from me, but you was an FOB. Call our friend over at the New York Times, have him write this story, or give him this story to write, right? They released this information. In Unity, there is strength. Keep them from being unified. Now, so you see all these manifestations of all this stuff today. You condemn and criticize without knowing that there was a structured program that you can go on the government site and read that created the chaos that you're witnessing today. Not a conspiracy theory, but you go look it up. You can say, well, Dr. Powers, he just, I don't know all about. Go look it up yourself, right? In between your multiple choice and true false tests. In unity, there is strength. A truism that is no less valid for all is tiredness and effective correlation of black nationalist groups. They were afraid of that happening. Prevent the rise of a messiah who could unify and electrify the black militant nationalist movement. Malcolm X might have been such a messiah. He is the martyr of the movement. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Elijah Muhammad all aspire to that position. Elijah Muhammad is less of a threat because of his age. King could be a very real contender for this position should he abandon his supposed obedience to white liberal doctrines, nonviolence, and embrace black. Now, J. Edgar Hoover wrote this. This is what he wanted his agents to do. Get rid of a messiah, destroy the organizations, deunify them, discredit them, and then in 2017, you get what you got. We don't know what organization is in charge and who's leading. This is a government program. How do you analyze what's happening today without going back and looking at this, and this took place in the 19th? How do you just forget about it? It would be like the United States forgetting about the Revolutionary War and World War I and World War II and the Cold War and try to explain our relationship with Russia today. You can't do it. Right? You got to go back and look at all of that, and we do it every night on the news and say this is how we got to here we are today. But when we see the communities in the disarray and the chaos that they are, we don't go back and look at this. And we are students of higher education. So what are the students of lower education reading? If the students of higher education don't know this, then what about the students of lower education? Right? Yes. Oh, you can go to any, well, the government, you can go to any of the government, you can go to the FBI website, but you can go to any of the government websites that's listed under the Freedom of Information Act, and you can actually put in COINTELPRO, and you'll get government documents. You can actually go to the library. They should have archives on this too. If you, I know we don't go to the library as much as we used to, you know what I mean? I was walking by the library here, but I tell you what, cafeteria get a lot more business in the library. I don't know why. Maybe we need to put some books in the cafeteria. All right. Prevent militant black nationalist groups and leaders from gaining respectability by discrediting them to Now, they're going to discredit blacks. So if I'm a leader and I'm trying to do the right thing, they got to turn me into a radical, right? They wrote this, this is their words, right? I got to discredit them. The goal of discrediting black nationalists must be handled tactfully in three ways. You must discredit those groups and individuals to, first, the responsible Negro community. I don't know who that is, but whoever that is, discredit them to other blacks, right? Second, they must be discredited to the white community, both the responsible community and to liberals who have the vestige of sympathy for black militant nationalists simply because they are Negroes, all right? These groups must be discredited in the eyes of the Negroes, the radical, the fallible. The last area requires entirely different tactics. Publicity about violent tendencies and radical statements merely enhances black nationalists. To the last group, it adds respectability. A final goal should be to prevent the long-range growth of black militant organizations, especially among the youth. Divide the young from the old. Divide them. Send them off on something else. Specific tactics to prevent these groups from converting young people. Harassment, intimidation, violence, eviction, job loss. You know, the Black Panther Party was called what? The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. We always leave that off. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense has started a Breakfast for Children program because they said, as Marcus Garvey said, sick and hungry people don't make good revolutionaries. I keep asking people to change their behavior and they're hungry and they're sick. How am I going to teach a child algebra if he got a tooth decay and he's sitting in the classroom with, anybody ever had a toothache? How do I teach you math He said, people keep blaming the children for not learning. You don't even know their health condition. They sitting up there with all kind of ailments, right? And you're trying to teach them math and want to know why they don't learn. So they started the Breakfast for Children program, the free lunch program, the free health clinics, right? The FBI, look it up. The FBI actually poisoned the food for the Breakfast for Children program in Washington, D.C. because they wanted to turn the community against the Black Panther Party and create a division. After they destroyed that, they realized that Breakfast for Children program was working so well because the children was coming in, they were being fed, they were learning, they were listening. So they said, well, that thing really worked. We need to create one of our own. So now we have breakfast programs in all the schools. It wasn't started by the government. It was started by the Black Panther Party for self-defense, taken over by the government after they destroyed the Black Panther Party for self-defense. Look it up yourself. I mean, you're students of higher education. Look it up yourself, right? You want to know how we got to where we are today, the disarray, the chaos, the killing of each other, the miseducation, the underdevelopment, the de-development. There's a history to it, even in the documents of this nation. The most intense COINTEL operations were directed against the black movement, particularly the Black Panther Party. This resulted from FBI and police racism. This is how they killed Fred Hampton. The Black Panther parties came under attack when their work featured free food and health care and community control of schools and police. How can you set up a program to destroy programs that were for free food, free health care, without government intervention? They weren't even asking the government for money. It wasn't Obamacare or anything else. They were doing it themselves, having doctors get free medical care, all right? They would, if you want policing change in your communities, the police are brutal, they were training children to grow up to be police officers to police their own communities. Right? Now we complain about the police in the community, but we don't grow our own. The Black Panther Party in the 1960s said, well, if you want better policing, then birth them and have them and grow them and groom them, and then they're the police to police your community. They're your children, so you know they're good police officers. They destroyed all of that. Now, we have kind of, in many communities, kind of mercenary policing. The FBI COINTEL papers consist of 17,000 pages of material about Martin Luther King Jr. Now, they talk about black nationalists, violent people, but who are they compiling the most information on? Right? The King of Peace gets 17,000 documents on his every movement. And let me just say this to you. I don't care how good you think you are, none of us could mentally handle being under scrutiny every minute of our life, day and night. When you went to sleep, when you went to a hotel, everywhere you went, you were under scrutiny. The man took over the movement in his 60s, and they followed him and hounded him until he died. Now, how old was Dr. King when he died? 39. Think about this for a minute. If you want to know how much these people gave up and you want to criticize, I wouldn't have been them, I would have been this person. King died at 39. Malcolm X was assassinated at 39. Never made it to 40. Bob Marley, 36. All these people with everything they did to help us, they didn't even make it to 40. Look at when Booker T. Washington died. Go back and look at these people never made it out of their 30s and did more than most of us do in our damn lifetime. And they never made it out of 30. Never made it out of their 30s. Almost all of them never made it out of their 30s. Think about it. And they have all the accomplishments that they have. All right, 17,000 pages of material that the FBI gathered, not on the Russians, not on the Cubans, but on one man, Martin Luther. You know how much pressure he was under? You really understand that? What was one of his last speeches, what he said? He said, sometime I get discouraged, living under the threat of death every day, being misunderstood by friends and family. The very people I'm trying to help are trying to hurt me. When he started talking about the Vietnam War, SELC turned on him, and he said, I had to tell my own staff that your moral compass shouldn't be measured by the bottom line on your checkbook, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That it's not just about justice in the United States. There are no borders. Anyone that's being mistreated anywhere we should be dealing with. And his own people got mad and said, we better stay away from that. We're going to lose our donors. Right? And he said, no, this is a moral battle. He said, and we don't worry about being popular. He said, politicians care about being popular. Right? We should care about being right. Even if people dislike us, even if they hate us, even if our best friend and our mates turn their back on us, we should be concerned about. But how many of us got that moral conviction? soon as somebody say something bad about us, we whining. You couldn't be thin-skinned and do this work. All right, let me move quickly. I won't go through all this because we'll do that another time, Dr. Conyers. I know, if you ever invite me back. You will be back. Yeah, that's what Arnold said. There's only 3. You back right now. All right. African Americans now constitute 1 million. Come on, help me with this number. We gotta be innately bad people to constitute. We'd be 14% of the population and constitute 1 million of the 2.53 million. I mean, just use, as my grandmother said, use some common sense. Something wrong with those numbers. I don't care what you are or where you from. You guys sit back and say something wrong with that. I don't know what it is. I haven't figured it out. I'm going to take one of these criminal justice classes so I can research this. But something wrong with that. Would you agree with that? All right. Somebody's got to address that, right? All right. Whatever you create, you eventually confront. James Baldwin tried to explain it. He said, you want to know why the children are acting out? You want to know why they're acting out? Because their he said that they saw themselves as others had seen. They had been formed by the images made of them by those who had the deepest necessity to despise them. I mean, whatever you listen to, and this is not a condemnation, but the songs about us killing each other and raping each other and calling women bitches and whores. I mean, we don't even run the record industries. Come on, give me a break. I mean, didn't he not tell you that you are being formed by the people who have the deepest necessity to despise you? And that's the image you're getting. You got to undo that. You will never effectively counter that which you do not fully understand. All right? Whether we like it or not, as James Baldwin said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it's faced. Somebody got to have the courage to say, you know, I don't really want to talk about this. This is an ugly truth, but we ain't never going to change it unless we can get in a room like this in an institute of higher education and face this fact and deal with it. Not only deal with the issues of what has been done to us, but what we have done. Yes, sir.
Should the government be involved with Chicago? In your opinion?
Well, they are. I mean, the government isn't. You mean the federal government? In some form or fashion, but you can't call in a strike on your own position, too. Now, we already told you about COINTELPRO, so if you need government help, because you do need resources, then you have to dictate the kind of help you get. You just can't, because when they come in, they don't know how to go home. They're like a bad guest. You understand? Even when things get better, I might invite you over my house to stay, but after 3 months, I'm going to say, look, dude, I thought you needed to sleep someplace for a night. You done moved in, changed the channel on my TV. You know, moving stuff around in my refrigerator. What I'm saying is invite them in, but you have to have, because you need the resources. You need the help, but you are still a local government. You're still a state, so you have to control, and you have to make sure that whoever your mayor is in that particular city, that they have enough strength to say this is what we need, and this is the limitations of your help, and not sell out at all costs. So they need help in Chicago, no doubt about it. To be quite frank with you, the murder rate in Baltimore is higher proportionally, 42, 43 murders in 40 days. Really? Right? So you do need help with resources. Let me just tell you from my FBI background, this is very solvable. All the guns that we are collecting, let me give you some information. All the guns that we are collecting off the streets in these cities come from some other state, some other country. So you need the ATF in there tracing these damn guns, because somebody putting guns in these people's hands. In Chicago, they broke in the train and took automatic. What is a train doing sitting in the middle of Chicago for them to take semi-automatic weapons off the train and end up on it? Who stopped a train full of guns in a city full of murder? Somebody committed that crime. Pharmaceutical agencies, our drugs are stronger now than they ever been. These dudes who are selling drugs dropped out in the 8th grade. Are you serious? But the pharmaceutical companies are making Tylenol 1, Tylenol 2, Tylenol migraine, Tylenol daytime, nighttime, extra strength. Somebody know how to do some chemistry. I got to read the bottle 3 times to take 2 aspirin. So I know it ain't me. I don't know how to make it stronger. Right? So we got to start asking the right questions, especially those of us in higher education. So they should help, but you got to limit their help. paradox of education is that as one begins to become conscious, one's examined. If you really are educated, then you should be asking the questions I'm asking today. The more educated you become, the more you should examine society. What did Dr. King say when they say, you're criticizing the war in Vietnam? He said, what did Dr. King say about the war in Vietnam? We are criminals in that war. We've committed more war crimes than any nation. Then he came back and said, and I love this nation too much to be quiet about it. He said, God didn't call America to do what it's doing in the world today. I'm not condemning or criticizing America because I hate America. I'm criticizing it because I love it, and I know this is not what this country is supposed to do. So your criticism may indicate your love for something rather than your hate for something, because if I don't care about you, I'm not going to condemn, I'm not going to criticize you. I don't really care what you do. That's the Dr. King we can't handle. Not the Dr. King of 1963 that we keep going back to when I Have a Dream speech. He lived in 1968. That's when he became a little bit, he said, wait a minute, something, that's when he started talking about the Vietnam War. That's when he even started talking about the black church, who he said, quoting from the Bible, they had more religion in their hand and their feet than they had in their heart and in their head. He said there's over 1 billion Christians in the world, and if the Christians really were Christians, we wouldn't have crime and poverty on our streets. That's the Dr. King they had to assassinate. The 63, I Have a Dream, everybody hold hands. I can tolerate him. I don't necessarily like him, but in 68, he got to go. Because now he's saying injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Now he's linking Vietnam with the United States and the issues here. He's linking poverty, not just crime, but poverty with the issues here. That's a little too much. You got to go now. You got to go back to having a dream. And what's on his tombstone down there? Here cometh a dreamer. Let us slay him, then see what become of his dreams. And in 2017, what has become of his dreams? Here cometh a dreamer. Let us slay him, then see what become of his dreams. That's the king they were worried about. That's the one we don't read. Every year, we do the I Have a Dream speech. But we should mature and evolve as we get older, right? So the 68 king should be a little bit better than the 63 king. Go listen to those sermons.
That's right.
Go listen to those sermons that we can't, whoo, that king a little tough, right? We want the old king, right? Somebody else had their hand up? All right. I'm the so-called, this is Carter G. Woodson, in case you see his picture again this month for Black History Month. This is what he looked like. All right, let's not forget Carter G. Woodson anymore. Let's not go around and talk about Black History Month. It's a short month. Now, who started this thing? I mean, we should be able to answer that. Can we do that? Can we at least walk out the door and know what Carter G. Woodson was out, and don't go out and say, I know who that picture is. That's Samuel Jackson. Come on, get real. All right, let's fix that part a little. Let's at least walk out with that knowledge. Can we handle that? All right. The so-called modern education, with all its defects, however, does others so much more good than it does the Negro because it has been worked. So in other words, like Booker T. Washington said in Up From Slavery, right? But he said, I'm not saying the education system can't help us, but we're going to have to add to it because it wasn't designed for us. Booker T. Washington taught at Tuskegee Institute, right? And let me tell you what he did, because he's been denigrated in history. People say, well, he's the one that said it was okay to be a segregated. I said, no, Booker T. Washington looked at the times. By the way, Booker T. Washington didn't make it out of his 30s either. He died of what they called, at that time, the black man's disease, which means he had stress, high blood pressure, probably not necessarily all caused by whites, because I work around some people that look like me, and they damn near give me high blood pressure every day. But I'll just leave that alone. But what I'm suggesting is this. So Booker T. Washington said, okay, we'll stay segregated. So people say, you selling out, you shouldn't. He said, no, what I'm saying is, this is what he said. And remember this, because this is important. He said, excellence can create integration. Integration can never create excellence. Sitting next to a white person will not make you excellent. If you become excellent and the best surgeon in the world, when people are dying, they're going to integrate to your surgical bay.
That's right.
Because now they want to live. Excellence can create integration. Integration can never create excellence. Be great at what you do. And people, when they need you, they'll be asking for you. They want to ask, what color is he? I don't know, but you got about a half an hour to live. Damn that, get me over there. Right? What did he teach the students? Now, I know, don't do this, professors, because you're going to lose a lot of students. You have a retention problem. But at Tuskegee, he said not only did his students, because at that time, blacks were really being treated badly, he said you not only have to learn, he had people getting education degrees, but he said every student who went there had to learn how to grow their own food. He said, because at the very least, if you lose your job, you still got to eat. So if you were a student there, you had to grow your food. You had to learn how to set up a garden and grow it. He said, because at the very least, I don't want your lack of the ability to have a job to lead you to preying on your own brother. I want you to have another option. Grow your own food even if you can't buy it. Not only this, what else did they have to do? They had to build their own dorms. And not only did they have to build their own dorms, I know some of you about to leave. Hell, now, wait a minute now. I don't even want to do homework. They had to make the brick to build their own dorms because he said at the very least, even if you can't get employed, if you can develop shelter and grow your own food, then you won't go out and prey on each other. But the system is designed now that if I control all of your employment, if I cut your employment off, and you've got to have food, shelter, and clothing, you're going to prey on your own. Go look at Booker T. Washington's Up From Slavery. Early 1900s said you've got to have all of these skills so that your only alternative in times of desperation is not crime. He wrote that in the 1920s. We don't even teach that anymore when we're trying to get crime down. There's nothing new under the sun. We just got to go back and read it, brilliant people, right? All right. I'm almost out of time now. I knew you were going to say that. All right. Marcus Garvey, if you have no confidence in self, you are twice defeated in the race of life. I won't go through all this because I want to answer your question. The only free lunch in life is in the mousetrap. I tell young people this all the time. You know, what did Frederick Douglass say? A man may not get all he paid for in life, but he damn sure gonna pay for all he get. And if you ain't paying for it, it's a trap. Now, how do I know this from a law enforcement standpoint? Evidence class. Because when I was in the FBI, there's nothing that anyone, you know, right now your phone's under the Patriot Act. You're familiar with the fact that you have a chip in your phone that as an FBI could turn on and turn off. Even if you turn your phone off and throw it in the back seat, I can turn it on and monitor your conversation. God bless America, right? Now, what I'm saying is, we could get anybody we want if we targeted them at the right time for the right thing. Because people are creatures of habit. If you're dealing drugs, guess what you're going to do tomorrow? You're going to deal drugs. Whatever you're doing, I could catch you if I want to catch you. We had people who we could have caught after selling drugs for 6 months, but the supervisor said, well, let them do it for a year, then we can give them 20 years. But if we take them down now, that's kind of an intervention. Damn, don't intervene, because we're going to take them out forever. Right? We had people on their cell phone. This was so funny. I hate to say this. They would do secret codes on their cell phones, and even back then, some of the pages, and they would say, yeah, now meet me here, so on. And they got to send it to the FCC satellite, which came to us. We had to decode it for you. Then they would get there and say, who snitched on me? You snitched on you. You don't own Verizon or AT&T. You called us. And forget me, one more anecdote, just one more, I promise you. They would say, listen, I haven't paid my phone bill in 6 months. I don't know what's going on, but let me go ahead and say, we're going to pay your bill. We need you to talk. We need to indict you. We can't have you turn your phone off and we record. Don't worry about your bill. Keep indicting it. We're going to get you 40 years. We take care of Verizon. How much is that a month? We got you. They thought they were getting over, and they were burying themselves under. So you can't, we tell young people, you can't really beat the system. You may think you're beating the system. You're slick, you're whispering, you got secret codes like a baseball player on first base, and we decoding all of that. You ain't that smart. We're just letting you go until we are ready to come for you. We got other stuff to do. We know you're going to be doing this next year. You ain't already, you ain't get no divine intervention and change your behavior. I gave a lecture at a prison in Baltimore. Baltimore papers wrote it was between the Crips, the Blood, Black Guerrilla family. Went in to talk to them about changing their behavior. I said, I don't mind you yelling east side or west side, but do me a favor. own a house there. Don't sleep in your mother's basement in your east side or west side, because it ain't yours. I talked to him about getting out of the business, taking that money, turning it into good money, buying something away. Then the newspaper wrote, Dr. Powers is teaching drug dealers how to launder money. I'm trying to save lives. Either you get them out of this, or they're going to kill people, you maybe tomorrow or today. I've got to deal with a strategy to change behavior, not a philosophy put together in an academic institute in a textbook. If I want people, if you take something away from people, you better replace it with something else, or they're going to keep doing what they're doing. You can't just go in and say, cut that behavior out. What's the alternative? I better come at the same time with the alternative. Just like AT&T give you with Sprint and Verizon. Come to us, leave them, here's why we're better. Only when we're dealing with our young people, we just say, leave that alone, but don't give them a better option. Doesn't make good common sense. It's illogical to take something from someone and not have a plan to replace it with someone else, because they're going to think you're crazy. They're going to think you're crazy. If you get evicted from your house today, you better be looking for an apartment. You've got to have an alternative. You understand? But only when we're talking to young people do we come up with these pie-in-the-sky philosophical, and then we have all this crime on the streets. No intervention. Does it make sense? Use your higher education to actually educate. When I discover who I am, I'll be free. Anybody? Well, that's Ralph Ellison. What book did he write?
Invisible Man.
Good, Invisible Man. Thank you, DeLacy. Because reinforced argument. Listen, we are so brilliant with philosophies. Booker T. Washington said it won't mean anything unless you get some results. Don't tell me how brilliant this theory is unless you can show me what this theory came up with. All right, I'm going to leave it at that. All right? I've always said this. This is the last slide. I'm going home. I've always said this. Last year, I had a 6-month battle with cancer, and people would say to me, Doc, I'm so sorry. And that was all good, because I know they did feel sorry, but I wanted them to come up with a cure, damn the sorriness. But at any rate, I appreciated the sorriness, though. But I was looking for doctors. So actually, I got through that phase in my life. But even while I was going through it, knowing that I had done this all of my life, you understand what I'm saying? That I had tried to touch other people, that I had tried to leave a legacy, that I worked with young people, not just talked about it, whether they were in the classroom or on the streets. I said, even if I die, it's a beautiful death, because it's been a beautiful life, and I can live with that. I don't want to. I want to live longer, right? I want to go and eat some of the bad food y'all eating in the cafeteria. I want to get one of them greasy subs from Jerry's, right? I want to do all those things. But if I have to die, if I've done this part on this side, this legacy, then it's still a beautiful death. I can live with that. I don't want to. The worst condition or situation for me was to get into old age and look back and say, you know, I woulda, coulda, I shoulda. I don't want to be that person. I want to leave it all on the field. I don't want the pastor to have to lie about me at my funeral. You ever been to some funerals where the pastor try to say something good about the dude in the casket, and you know, and they know he ain't been no damn good all his life? The pastor gonna almost have to pray himself into hell to say something good about this person, and some of them just ain't gonna do it. They just look at the casket and say, well, let me talk about something else. Damn him. Right? You understand what I'm saying? I want to get to the point where someone can actually do a eulogy for me and be telling the truth, because I would have left a legacy. I've got the higher education. I've got the common sense. I know the research. I do know that the conditions on our streets can be changed. I do know we can do better. We can save lives, but it's going to take a commitment upon all of us to not worry about death so much, except that when we get there, it's a beautiful death. All right, I'm done. I'm out. Thank you all very much.
Excellent job. Thank you, Dr. Powers. Woo! He will be back again, and so will DeLacy, and so will my sister. And in fact, I'm already thinking about revisiting this again next year, because it's been a long time since he's been here, since the last time. How many years ago was that the last time you were? 10 years or so? Maybe more than.
I'm only about 20 years.
Yeah, okay. But we definitely going to do this again. So, you know, we'll have them come and do some new information and whatnot. What we're going to do now is going to ask you folks for if you have any questions. But I have not so much, well, it is a question. I'm wondering, reading, and I don't know whether you knew him, F. Wesley Swearingen's book, what was it, Memoirs of an FBI Agent, where he talks about some of the techniques. And certainly back in the days when I was running around with the Panthers and whatnot, reading Earl Anthony's Picking Up the Gun. But my question is, I remember Gil Noble had one brother on his show some years ago, that was Darthard Perry, who infiltrated so many organizations. Do you know what happened to him and what his final?
No, I don't know what happened.
Okay,
to be honest.
okay, all right.
You can-
Oh yeah, okay. Dr. Powers also has some books here. Let me hold it up. And I recommend that you read this. I read this, I have a copy at home. Eyes to My Soul, The Rise or Decline of a Black FBI Agent. Dr. Powers, how much is it? It's $20. I recommend that you get a copy today, and of course, he's here to sign it for you. And anytime you get something inscribed, it's worth more than it would have been had it not been inscribed, so you need to do that. And I believe DeLacy still has some, I hope he still has some books here with him today too, so that people can get that book. So if you have any questions, please direct your questions to Dr. Powers, and he will answer those questions.
Here and then there. Yes, ma'am.
So you said that when a Messiah is built within the community, the FBI and the government tries to come in and infiltrate. So what would you suggest for people that would like to be a Messiah and would like to build things but are in fear of being
Well, the thing is that there's a couple of things here. So fear, to me, is just not an option. You just got to put the right people around you. In fact, the reason, and I'll be honest with you, the reason Martin Luther King is that today is that the people left him on the balcony by himself. How can you have a man under threat of death every day and you let him go out on the balcony and wave like this? We wouldn't do that with the president. So partly, I'm not saying that it wasn't the person that shot him or the people that shot him. It's responsibility. But if you are so important to us in our movement, how do I, first of all, you know how that happened, right? He was in a hotel. The newspapers convinced him to go to the Lorraine Hotel because they said that the hotel was white-owned, the motel was black-owned, there was no black-owned hotels. Had he been in a hotel, there wouldn't have been a balcony. There would have been, for those of you who don't know the difference between a hotel and a motel, most of you do, for one reason or another, we won't talk about right now. But, so he was sent there for a reason, and then he was lacking security. So I say we all got to leave it. The only way not to die is to not have been born. So just make your life meaningful. Don't worry about that. Put the right people around you, but don't worry about it. Just do the right thing. Just let it go. I mean, you're going to go anyway. Just go with it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I think this is what you have to do. I think that a lot of the teachers who I've met haven't, it comes down from the administrators to an extent, to principals. And schools where you have progressive principals, they make sure that the instructors are not just teaching, but are teaching things that are advanced to students that are teaching them the right history. So they've got to tell them about this. Even the teacher who I corrected with my son on Thomas Jefferson, she said, oh, I didn't know that, now I'll start teaching this. So I don't think the teachers are intentionally, they haven't been taught this for one thing. They're trying to get the students prepared for the tests, but they don't understand they're not mutually exclusive. So I think the leadership in the building itself, or maybe even the parents, can convince the teachers that you've got to add to your lesson plan because this is not properly preparing children for the reality that they face. You're not teaching them to be hopeless or to be scared, but if you're teaching history, you got to teach it right. I think leadership in schools, every school I've gone to, I went to the principals and I said, listen, you've got to make sure these students are being educated, not just pushed out the door. That's a fiduciary responsibility. And teachers will listen to you in a leadership position. Unfortunately, and we were talking about this with DeLacy today, sometimes people are promoted to their level of incompetence. You are a great teacher, you pass a test, and we think you're a principal, not understanding now the greater burden that you have to not only lead the students, but to lead the teachers. That's what we got to get in, because otherwise, like I said, it's just a shame how many students are coming out of schools. Right.
Made out to be these horrible people because they weren't. They did a lot of good, and so many people don't know that.
Yeah, they cut off their name for one thing. That takes it away, because they were named the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Who can be against self-defense? Now we only know them as the Black Panther Party, and that's a logical, I mean, they added self-defense so you can see that they really were for self-defense. But you got to go, and the good thing about it now is that information is there, not only published by the government, but published in books, but somebody's got to teach that, and teach where the breakfast, teach about free health clinics before we were talking about universal health care. I mean, these things existed, they're not fake. You can actually go empirically and see that they were there. So, whoever she go to with the mic, I'm just.
My question is, as a former FBI,
Yes, ma'am.
how does one put so much resource into, in other words, catching kids with marijuana or catching people with marijuana, and you actually know there's guns being brought into certain neighborhoods and put there for a specific reason, and you can't infiltrate that?
Yeah, you can absolutely infiltrate it. There's a couple of things going on. Police departments, there's this statistical analysis system that I talked to the creator of this. She's at Johns Hopkins now, Comstat, and it would measure crime in certain areas. She created it for a very good reason, so I can see the high crime areas. But what police commissioners and mayors did was political policing. So what they said was, just go out and make arrests in those areas. I'll look good and get reelected. So they had the police so busy with numbers, because they believe that's what the public wanted, and not busy with strategies that actually reduce crime. They're not actually, when they work with federal agencies, they don't direct the federal agencies, they just say, we need your help, rather than saying, I need every gun to come in, trace back to this particular resource. In Baltimore City, for example, we had a gun buyback program, right?
But that's
we
what-
haven't had it since then.
Yeah.
We haven't had it since then. But what happened is that we bought the guns back, and then 3 weeks later, they were used in a murder. So that means they should have been downstairs in a police locker. But you need great leadership. And I know we elect people, in this country, you don't have to be intelligent to get elected. You just have to be popular. So we elect the wrong leaders, and then we never ask them specifically for their plan for dealing with these particular issues. And they don't have to give it to us, so they just come up with something to make them look popular rather than to do good for the community. That's the concept we have to change. Or at the very least, if they're already in office, I don't want this thing to be so grandiose that it seems like it's insurmountable. If they're already in office, then you've got to start publishing this information. We got blogs. I see everything on social networking telling me about when you eat, what you eat, and what piece. We got to start just delivering this information in shots over and over. Get a whole group of people, just shoot this information out in shots. This train full of guns was, people didn't even know that. The news reported it. But we got to put that information out there. Just do what you can. Now, I've said this. I can't be the quarterback and the wide receiver, but I can do something. Everybody can do something. And so even as you're dealing with this issue, because you can get so frustrated, you can say, I ain't dealing with that, it's too big, the government's too big. Just do something so that when you die, you can say, this is what I tried to do. All right? Take one bite at a time.
Thank you.
My question is, so when it comes to like how there's always this pushback on everything that we're trying to talk about, whether it be, the existence of Black history or trying to add explanations to like why all of this crime is happening, what's going on, how do we, is it just like always being armed with the facts? Like, is that the best strategy to kind of deal with those types of attitudes?
Yeah, always be armed with the facts. That's extremely important. And unfortunately, we haven't been armed with that. We just talked about the whole miseducation process that takes place. But be armed with the facts and then come up with a strategy for those facts. The thing that I always said is we need to turn emotion into energy. Look, they had the Trayvon Martin when he was killed. They had the marches, the whole Miami Heat team wore hoodies, and that law still is in effect in Florida. So after all the noise, and I'm not saying protests are not necessary because they are, but what's plan B? So even as you equip with the facts, say, this is what we're going to do first, this is how we're going to handle this argument, this is the next step we're going to do. This is fact, not fiction. I should have said it earlier. When I was in the FBI, I testified before Congress and told them this. When I was in the FBI, a document came across my desk about how to interview Black people. This is what it said, fact, not fiction. It said from Behavioral Science Unit at Quantico, Virginia. The black people are emotional and not intellectual. Let them vent, let them march, but in the end, they will not see it through to its logical conclusion. In other words, you know the scientific method, you have a hypothesis and you're not through with it till it comes to a logical conclusion. We got the hypothesis, but what is the logical conclusion? And we got to lay that out the day we lay out the hypothesis. We're not going to stop this. Whatever pressure there's, hypothetically speaking, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish, but let's say you're trying to change that law in Florida. You don't stop until something is changed. You don't go away when the media go away, because they know that. In Baltimore, they have protests at the City Hall in Baltimore. In front of City Hall, they got a place called Protest Square. Why would you protest in Protest Square? Why would you protest against the people at the place they designed for the protest to take place? But it's easy. So what we have to do is strategically think it through. You've got to be armed with facts, though. And as we said, miseducation, underdevelopment, and de-development. In other words, you know what you know, but I'm so good at what I do, I'm going to convince you that you don't know what you know. So you're developed, and I'm going to de-develop you. I'm going to actually take away, like the nations did in the Middle East, right? We took your silk and sewed it back to you as a pantsuit. I could have did that. That's de-development. But the facts, learn, read, analyze, think, and learn, burn the midnight oil, read when you don't feel like reading, be disciplined and focused, and whenever you get in a conversation with someone, lay facts on them, and watch how quickly the conversation changes and go away. Did you see the new movie, I'm Not Your Negro, by James Baldwin movie? It's an excellent movie, and what James Baldwin said in that movie in the 1960s, he said, how come when you say, give me liberty or give me death, you become a patriot? Whether it's in Israel, the United States, Japan, and when black people say, give me liberty or give me death, I become a criminal, a radical. How come we can say the exact same words, but depending on whose mouth it come from, whether you stand up and salute me or whether you look for a jail cell for me. It's in the movie. It's an excellent documentary. I mean, find it wherever. They're not showing it everywhere? Okay. Are they showing it here?
It's on Amazon if you look for it.
Oh.
If you go on Amazon Prime, it's free if you have Amazon Prime.
I don't know if it's free. You probably got some bootleg system hooked up. You probably still just came out, so it ain't free. But we'll go with that for the purposes of the microphone and the audience. Good answer. Go ahead. You got one of those Fire Sticks, right?
Yeah.
I know. You stealing. There ain't no damn free on no Amazon. All right, do what he said, but I'm doing a disclaimer right now. Go ahead.
My question is, you said to fight it with facts. This is dealing that we're in a time of the Trump era and his administration is filled with the alternative facts, as they call it. Is there some concern that fighting with facts might not be enough, especially when our Attorney General himself is actually named after two famous Confederate figures?
But let me just say this to you. I agree with you, but fighting with facts is not enough. You got to fight with facts and more. But it ain't just the Trump administration. I just told you about Thomas Jefferson, right? President Truman said, this is what he said. Go look it up online. Truman said, I believe that all men created equal unless you're black or Asian. He was president of the United States when he said it. You think about what? You think about what Trump said. So when Trump became president, people would say, I said, you know what, but I've seen this movie before. I would be more alarmed if I didn't know the history of presidents. So I know, I'm not saying we shouldn't be concerned now. But what I'm saying is that we should have always been concerned, and that's what facts allow you to do. So fighting with facts, even if they present alternative facts, continue to fight with facts, and then turn that facts and emotion into strategy. But I guess what has gotten me a little bit, because we act like this is a new kind of president. We had one president who was a card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. But because we don't know that history, we got nothing to compare that to. Richard Nixon said it's not a crime if the president does it. What the hell has Trump said is any different from that? Now, I'm not saying he's wrong, but I'm saying we can show this pattern so this never happen again. Because if not, it's just going to repeat itself. So if you call Trump racist, what are you going to say about Thomas Jefferson? Listen, Jefferson Davis, the leader of the Confederacy, in Washington, D.C. and Virginia, there's a street called Jefferson Davis. We got a terrorist who rebelled against the nation, led to a civil war, where hundreds of thousands of people died, and he got a highway named after him. All of those alternative facts exist. This one is right in front of us now, But line them up and then fight it with facts. And listen, even if during your course of your lifetime you don't win, you still got to fight. You still got, somebody will hear you. People here today will hear me. Some people gonna go read Thomas Jefferson's book. Or they not, but they know who Jefferson was. And listen, Jefferson was so bad that he admitted that he was wrong. What did he say? I tremble for this nation when I remember that God is just. That's his words. That at some point, all the wrong that he said that after he owned slaves, after he sold his, at least George Washington freed his slaves after he left, when he died. Thomas Jefferson wrote a will giving his slaves to other people, even though someone was some of his children. He got a monument. And then he said, oh my goodness, I tremble for this nation when I remember that God is just. Because I'm going to have to pay for this, and the nation will. So continue to fight it with facts. Because we don't have these facts yet. We're not just countering the Trump administration. Trump is not possible if teachers teach this history, because we can see when it's coming.
I actually have a follow-up question, if I may ask.
All right, 2 more questions because we have to get to something else, okay?
This is,
That one and this one here.
continuing on based on what you just said. This is, the Founding Fathers are very glorified, especially in the Conservative Party. This is being that's a whole another boundary of government to counteract with facts. How do you push the idea that Thomas Jefferson spoke so heavily on black people? This is, and still counteract the fact that, you know, the conservative idea of the Founding Fathers is that they're the greatest men who ever lived. And
Right, but that's not the conservative idea. That's conservatives and liberals. Everybody I know liked Thomas Jefferson except for DeLacy. Everybody else I know liked Thomas Jefferson. So all I'm saying is that you got to continue to counter it with facts, and you got to get it to the young people at an early age. We're feeding them mistruths, and they can't help but keep this system of misinformation going because they don't know any better. That's why I say it's not the children's fault, because they're grown. If I'm teaching Thomas Jefferson, I got to teach that. And listen, I'm telling you, in minority school districts, they're not teaching that. I'm telling you, the people who should know it most in a history class talking about Thomas Jefferson when my son went to school, they're not teaching that. And I'm telling you, it will have an impact. Maybe not in you in my lifetime. Remember Dr. King said, I may not get there with you, but I'm going to do this because it's right, even if I don't get to live to see the results of it.
Yes, I wanted to know, did you retire from the FBI or were you kicked out?
Damn. Yeah, I left on my own accord. I wasn't kicked out. I left on my own accord. Actually, I'll be honest, I'll tell you the whole story. My mother had suffered a 3rd stroke. I went home on a hardship transfer because the FBI allowed you to go home for a year and then you can come back if you want. And then I started teaching, and at American University I was offered the opportunity to create this program that I created, and I just decided to do this on my own. But I was not kicked out. Good answer, though. Do I look like somebody that should have been kicked out? Huh? Is that what you're trying to say? Telling the truth should get you kicked. You would kick me out, huh? All right. Thank you. Good way to end it.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. Please give it to him. We cut the question and answer period a little bit short because several people came to me who have to run and want to buy books. So I felt it was really good to let them buy the books. They can speak to Dr. Powers while he's here a little bit, and then they could run. But I think Dr. Powers did an excellent job asking you a question, and the presentation was, as we used to say, out of sight. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Please support Africana Studies. Make sure you come out tomorrow. And yeah, we're going to do that after they sign the books, because these people got to run. And those of you who stay around, we have a tradition here at the Office of Africana Studies. We take a group picture with anybody who wants to be in that picture. So after these people get their books, we're going to do the group picture.